Hey folks, Killer Be Killed here, bringing you my Goblin Gangland Weenie Rush deck, and I call this Weenie Rush because the goal is to cast as many small creatures as you can with haste and attack over and over again. This deck is built to win in 4 or 5 turns against a lot of decks, and as you're going to see, a lot of these cards synergize well with one another. If the Goblin creature doesn't have haste, another creature gives it haste. So the Goblin Arsonist, I chose him over the Bloom Brigade as the first drop just because of the simple fact that he does 1 damage when he dies. So since this is a Weenie Rush deck, that needling damage could help you win a game. Or the simple fact that you can block a 1/1 with it and kill another creature that's a 2/1 or a 3/1. Or you can even block a 2/2 because when your creature dies, you inflict that extra damage from the grave. So it can kill anything with a health up to 2. Goblin Bushwhacker, I like him because when you kick him, all your creatures get a +1 and gain haste. But you really don't ever want to cast that card without kicking it. It's kind of a waste. Goblin Grenade is obviously a very, very powerful card. You can sacrifice a token goblin and do 5 damage straight to a player's face, or even to a creature, a flyer out there. That's one of this deck's downfalls. Could have a little trouble against flyers. Goblin Guide is actually a great first drop. If you go first, you drop this 1 mana card, and all of a sudden you're doing 2 damage to them on the first turn. The only danger with this is you could give some decks land. You don't want to give Liliana or other decks like that too much land, so just be careful exactly when and how you use it. If your enemy is mana strapped, don't use that card, obviously. Raging Goblin, just because it has haste, that's the only reason it made the cut. Ember Hauler, I like Ember Hauler because you can sacrifice it and do 2 damage to the player or creature. It's a 2/2 body as well. You can combine that with the Goblin Grenade to do 7 damage to like a big creature, an Elder Scale Worm or something. I actually was able to kill one of those one game doing that and was able to win the game because of it. Goblin Pile Driver, absolute monster against blue decks, and it gets +2 for every other attacking goblin. Really good in the Weenie Rush build. Battle Cry for the Goblin War Driver, obviously it pumps up all your creatures with +1. That's a huge card. Kranko's Command, 2/1/1 goblins. They help because we have 3 Goblin Chieftains in here. Probably the only reason that's included. You get 2 more goblins, and they help your other creatures, like your Reckless one. Warren Instigator, absolute phenomenal card in 1v1. It has double strike, so which that means it has first strike and it strikes again. So you're killing anything with a health of 2. You're living if you attack anything that has a health of 1. And when it does damage to the opponent, you get to cast a goblin creature from your hand free of charge. And since it has double strike, you actually get to cast 2 creatures from your hand free of strike. So that's a great 2-drop. Gem Palm, I always use this to cycle unless, there's some situation where, okay, I'll just put another 2/1 out there. If I have a chieftain out there, it becomes a 3/2. But for the most part, this is to kind of get rid of a flyer, get rid of a big card, maybe an Elder Scale Worm, a Grave Titan, or just something big out there that I don't want on the board that I otherwise can't kill or block. So this card goes both ways. You can use it as a creature, not great bargain as a creature, but since you can cycle it, it's a good card. Goblin Chieftain is actually one of the strongest cards in our deck here. Any goblin creature you cast has haste, and all your other creatures are +1/+1. So when you get a Kranko Mob Boss out there, you can actually tap him as soon as you cast him if you have a Goblin Chieftain on the board. So ideally, you cast a Goblin Guide turn 1, maybe a Kranko's Command turn 2, a Chieftain turn 3, Kranko turn 4, the game's over. You've won the game pretty much at that point. War Chief is just like a Goblin Chieftain, not quite as strong, but it's another way to get your creatures to have haste, and your Goblin spells are cheaper by 1 mana. Not a huge help because you don't need a lot of mana to win with this deck. Click Slither, this might be one card on the cut and block in my deck. I mean, it's a 3/3, so it helps. You can. The reason I like it is because you can block bigger creatures with it. You can sacrifice a couple token goblins and make it a 7/7. And you can kill big creatures with this. So that kind of actually probably won't cut this card. Just sometimes, if you play in the life deck or something, games drag on a little bit. They can't always expect to win in 4 or 5 turns, even though this deck is very good at that. So you want to have a way to block larger creatures instead of just sacrificing a goblin every turn. Notice just our mana curve. You have 11 1-drops, 10 2-drops, 6 3-drops, so low mana curve. Goblin Ringleader is actually a great card if you get hit with like a Mutilate or a Day of Judgment from Johnny, because it helps actually put cards back in your hand. Because if you put all your goblin creatures out there and you're about to kill the enemy and they wipe the board, now you're top deck and you're like, what do I do? It could take you a little while to build a goblin deck back up, and you could, really prime yourself for a loss that way. So Goblin Ringleader's actually a good card. Sometimes I'll save him in my hand just for that reason. Kranko Mob Boss, always you want to cast him when there's a haste, when he has haste from either a Goblin Chieftain or a Goblin War Chief. Because he's always going to draw a removal spell. Some way, somehow, a Prey Upon, a Murder, you know, a Vindicate, whatever's going to happen, they're going to try to get rid of him as quick as they can. An Oblivion Ring, anything. But if you have haste creatures out there, you can cast them, and you can put that many goblins on the board immediately. So you kind of want to try to save him, at least get some utility out of him. And if you have a Goblin Chieftain out there, he's not making 1/1 goblins. He's making 2/2, so that's a very powerful combination. Reckless One, he has haste, so he's included. In addition to the haste, if you have 4 or 5 goblins out there, you know, he becomes a 5/5. He's strong. He can actually block big creatures. He can attack. You don't have to worry about like aggro green decks just killing your creatures every turn because you can attack him. Siege Gang Commander is obviously a game finisher. You cast him out there, you get 3/1 goblins out there, and then you can start sacrificing him each turn. Basically, you burn damage straight to the face of the enemy. If you have a bunch of goblins out there, if you have a Krenko out there, you can just start sacrificing things. Or even if you have 6 mana and you just want to do 6 damage to finish the game, you can attack one turn to get your opponent down to 6 and then swing with it. Voracious Dragon, the same thing. It's a finisher. If you got like 7 or 8 goblins out there, you call them in, you devour them all, and you do like 14 damage straight to the face of the enemy. The game's over. So that card, Siege Gang Commander and Voracious Dragon, are nice game finishers. Goblin Grenade's a nice game finisher. So we have some ways to attack and finish, or basically, you know, a creature. It's a 4/4 body as well. That'll help a little bit. Plus, it gets counters on it to devour 1. If you sacrifice 5 goblins and you call it in, now it's a 9/9. And you've also done 10 damage directly to the face. So, all in all, a great card. This deck is built to win fast. 83% creatures. And that's another thing with the Goblin, where you look at the top 4 cards of your library. Since it's 83% creatures, a lot of times you'll grab 2 creatures with that card, so it helps. Goblin Fireslinger. This actually doesn't look like a bad 1-drop. I mean, if you want to include one of these over one of the Arsonists, I could see that, but for what I'm doing now, it's been working. I like the needle and damage, and even though that does needle each turn, so you know, you could probably consider throwing that in over that, or putting it in as a 61st card. Shock, Smelt. I'm not really worried about like removing artifacts, because but if you're playing blue, by the time they get a Panoptic Mirror out, you're pretty much killing them already. In green, and I mean, you're not really too worried. The erratic, you just keep mana open and can't return your tokens with the Erratic Portal. They could return their own creatures, but you got to hopefully kill them before they get that full bounce effect moving out there, because then they're going to really start building up some massive armies. Goblin Piker really doesn't do much for me. He's just a 2/1, has no special abilities, so we'll basically put in Krenko's Command 2/1/1 goblins over him. That way, if you have a Goblin Chieftain out there, now you have 2/2/2 goblins. Ring of Velkus is a complete waste in this deck for me. I would absolutely encourage you not to use it. At 2 mana, you really want to be dropping creatures down and building your army fast for a quick kill. You don't want to be dropping a ring and then equipping it. It's just a waste of a turn for me early in the game. This is a fast weenie rush deck. You go fast, you go hard. You want to kill the enemies quickly. All your creatures have haste, or some of your creatures are giving your other creatures haste. So there's a lot of synergy with this deck. Creatures are building up when they attack together. Creatures are getting +1 counters. Creatures are devouring each other to boost themselves up and do damage to the enemy. Goblin Artillery, again, it's not too bad, but at 3 mana, I want to be casting a Chieftain or something to that effect. I don't like Goblin Assault for the simple fact that it forces your creatures to attack every turn, so I would implore you not to use that card in there. Sometimes you don't want to attack with your creatures, so forcing them to, they could just all die. Rummaging Goblin, too slow, discard a card, draw a card, 3 mana for a 1/1, just not helping. Squee doesn't make the cut, unfortunately. He's a legendary creature. You get him every turn, but basically it's 3 mana, and I'm casting a 1/1 every turn. Sure, it'll help you for a board clearing or something like that, but generally not very useful to me. If you needed a blocker every turn, Squee would help, and you can block and recast him every single turn, but I'm not looking really to play defense with this deck. Sometimes you have to, I can't lie, but you're not really defensive minded in this. In the Devour 3, we don't include that because simply the lack of flying or any sort of evasion or trample. There's no point in devouring all your creatures if you can be chump blocked by anything. Relentless Assault, I don't use this. Much too slow for this deck. You might say, well, yeah, I could attack twice 1 turn. But at 4 mana, I want to drop something else. I want to drop Krenko or something along those lines. So you don't really want to. I'm not looking to attack again that turn. I want to put creatures out there with haste to win quicker. The goal of this deck is to keep putting creatures and attacking with them. And these last the 4 cards or so are much too slow. Chance of the Forge 7 mana. You really shouldn't be making it to 7 mana too often with this deck. Even 6 mana. So